I just had my 75th birthday. So, well, yeah, a lot of my friends didn't make it. So, yeah, I started, as far as computers go, I started on Illustrator 88. Do you know what that was?
President Taft.
Yes. It was the Adobe Illustrator that was developed in 1988. And I started using it then, and then I knew how important it was going to be. But it was very crude in the beginning. And it takes a lot of the drudgery out of doing art. It can't make you an artist. And it still helps to know everything about art that you can and how to do it. But it's a great tool. So you're very lucky. But at any rate, I'm an agent from the 20th century. So I'm here to tell you about the last 50. I grew up in Miami Beach, Florida, surrounded by Art Deco and a certain tawdry resort glamour. I soon escaped to Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon, where I earned a BFA in painting and an MFA in printmaking. Here I am, standing in my senior painting cubicle, which was also used by Andy Warhol many years earlier. I was told this by my senior painting teacher, who was also Warhol's painting teacher. I learned to paint by doing portraits of my friends, and you can just go through these 7. I think there's 7. And they're all very big. That's 8 feet high. So I was just next, 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 next. I soon switched to more complex compositions, which I described as existential snapshots. Next. Sartre and Camus, amongst other existentialists, were very much in the air in the early 60s. Next. Being very serious, young, and slightly demented, I hopped right on the existential boat, headed for the sea of nihilism and despair. Okay, next. The influence of Edvard Munch and Francis Bacon, amongst others, are quite obvious in these works. Next. Thoughts of torment, suicide, and death preoccupied my young creative imagination. I must have been very depressed. Next. I was asked to join the MFA program at Carnegie Mellon, and after I got my BFA in 1964. Next. I created a series of paintings and drawings that were meant as severe criticism of Pope Pius XII for his inaction during the rise of Hitler and Nazism, pogroms, and the Holocaust in 1930s Germany. Next. He required that the church remain neutral during the war and refused to condemn Kristallnacht in 1938. I wanted everything to, including the cloth, to seem desiccated, dry, colorless, and airless. Next. Pius XII refused to speak out against the Holocaust and continued to condemn the Jews as killers of Christ, as well as making deals with the Nazis to protect the Catholic Church in Germany. Next. Another contemplation of death and meaningless existence. That's 6 foot by 8 foot. Next. My 8 by 10 foot final thesis painting, a reference to mass genocide and unwanted people being stored away in stadiums by totalitarian powers to await some ominous final fate. I was depressed, do you think? Next. I go to the Big Apple, New York, from Pittsburgh. Next. After receiving my MFA, I moved to New York City and had a show at Brooklyn College. As I recall, the crowd was thinner than the cheese whiz on the Ritz crackers. Next. Here I am at Fantasy Farm. I got a call from some art school pals to be the artist for their light show company, Fantasy Unlimited. We did big commercial light shows for Bill Blast Fashions, Yardley Cosmetics, Polo Fashions, Clairol, Tinaco Chemicals. There were 6 of us, and we rented a 15-room farmhouse about 2 hours from Manhattan, where we created our light shows and grew vegetables, some of which we smoked. Well, another group of my art school friends were involved with Bill Graham in creating the Fillmore East Theater in the East Village in 1968. To complement the one in San Francisco. Next. This was actually my first poster for the Fillmore East. I used press type directly on the board and made it look dimensional with ink lines, and then glued on the Indians. I was learning to be psychedelic while actually flying by the seat of my pants. I had no idea what I was doing. Next. The idea for this poster came directly from a sophomore design problem at CMU. Create an Egyptian fresco using modern subject matter. Most people do not realize that the band, the Jefferson Airplane, is standing on the wings of an ancient Egyptian biplane, seen head-on with big whirling motors and a sarcophagus as a cockpit. Next. This was the first pencil sketch for the Hendrix show next to the color comp for the first idea, but Jimmy wanted all 3 band members of the Experience to appear on the poster. Instead of trying to put them in this sketch, I created a whole new idea. Next. This is the final result. I was interested in dot matrices at this time and used 3 colors in different combinations to make the hair into photons. Each dot was drawn by hand with a drop bow compass in ink. I don't think I could do this kind of hand inking today. This poster is in the Museum of Modern Art, the Smithsonian, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Victoria and Albert in London, and was chosen by Billboard magazine as number 8 in their list of 25 most important rock posters of all time. It was also chosen by Pratt Institute of Art and Design as one of the 100 graphic icons of the 20th century. This was the 3rd poster I had ever done. I just was lucky, I guess. Next. Oh, and I sort of learned what I was doing slowly. Bill Graham got me this job. When Mick Jagger saw this at manager Alan Klein's office, he said, "Oh, great, it's me and drag. I'm quite keen on drag, you know." I based the girl on one of Edward Muybridge's Figures in Motion. He was an early photographer. Next. This is the original poster for the now legendary Woodstock Festival, done in May of 1969. Oddly enough, the Wallkill Town Council considered this poster to be completely obscene and full of drug references, and demanded it had to be replaced by a, quote-unquote, more generic music image. Next. By that time, I was in the Caribbean on vacation, so the producers hired fellow artist Arnold Skolnick to do the now famous image of the Byrd on the guitar. His poster still did not change the Wallkill City Council's mind, and the festival had to be moved at the last minute to Max Yasgur's dairy farm. Of course, the rest is history. Arnold and I had a two-man show at the museum at Bethel Woods in 2012 titled Woodstock, A Tale of Two Posters. I did half of the poster advertising him, and he did half of the poster advertising me. The Bethel Museum is on the site of the original festival in August of 1969. Ironically, the Woodstock art is the only poster Arnold Skolnick ever created, as he was primarily a book designer and publisher. Next. Okay, after The Who's successful debut of Tommy at the Fillmore East, Bill Graham managed to talk the director of the Metropolitan Opera into allowing the first pop group ever to traipse the hallowed operatic boards of the venerable home of Caruso and Callas. I had 3 days to complete this poster, which was printed black on silver stock. Next. This is the central panel of the Met poster, and it was inspired by one of my creative heroes, Busby Berkeley, whom I consider one of the great artists of the 20th century. This composition represents the apotheosis of Tommy, rising to pinball sainthood amongst a host of tap-dancing pinball girls and a chorus of tuxedoed homosexuals. In the full-page ad in the New York Times Arts and Leisure section, the management had painted a black jockstrap over Tommy's private parts. I gather they were trying to save New York City from that shockingly prurient moment, a male frontal nude. Eek! But it stuck out like a sore thumb, and of course everybody noticed and some laughed. Next. Grace Slick and the band always did a show on Thanksgiving Day. This one in November of 1970. By the way, Grace could drink just about anyone under the table. Next. This poster was created for NBC to promote the start of what I like to call the Rhinestones and Amphetamines tour, which actually was never broadcast live except in Europe. As soon as it was over, Elvis got fat again. Poor little rich Baba. Next. Bill Graham wanted to do a dance concert with the Dead on the East Coast like they did in San Francisco. I did 3 dance concepts in pencil: the Jitterbug, the Lindy Hop, and the Big Apple. Being that it was New York, Bill chose the Big Apple. The dancers here are truckin' and posin', 2 of the many steps that make up the dance, the Big Apple. Bill had the seats removed from the Nassau Coliseum, but hardly anyone danced. Next. This was Lou's best-selling album ever. We had a meeting at the Ninth Circle, a famous gay bar on Christopher Street. He gave me an SX70 print Polaroid of him in mirrored sunglasses and a leather jacket for reference. Next. He also brought a shoebox full of Polaroids he had taken of drag queens. He asked that Sally, his favorite, appear on the back cover. So I put her in, reflected in his mirrored lens, looking loaded but in charge. Her real name was Renee Devine, of course. Next. A flamboyant Virgil Fox during his Bach and light show period. David Snyder, the light show creator, demanded at the last minute to be put in the poster as well. So he went directly into Virgil's organ, the only place he would fit. Next. Neil Bogart creator of Buddha Records, the premier bubblegum label of the late 60s and early 70s, invited me to his tiny office in the Brill Building. The Brill Building was the home of pop songwriters like Carole King, Paul Anka, and Neil Sedaka. He was starting a new label named Casablanca Records, which he wanted me to design, for which he wanted me to design the logo and the label, with him as Humphrey Bogart, of course. Next. The Kiss Boys, art from their 1978 single albums. I first met them when Neil Bogart asked me to the photo shoot of their debut album in 1972. I worked on Peter Criss's cat makeup until we all became too high to do anything else. It was the beginning of their subsequent Grand Guignol madness and success. Next. In January of 1981, I flew to LA to work on the Van Halen Fair Warning American Tour. My old friend from the Fillmore East, Noel Monk, was their manager. Nobody in New York City that I knew had ever heard of Van Halen. They thought I was working for Van Morrison. Little did they know the fame the LA bar band would shortly acquire. Next, the resident hopeless alcoholic. Many of the Dutch prefer alcohol to water because they live below sea level. Alex never drank water because fish fuck in it. I worked on graphics and built sets with my old friend from Woodstock and the Stones concert, Chip Monk. Next, genius guitarist, but trying to keep up with Alex in the cocktail department. He married Valerie Bertinelli while I was there at the famous Greystone Mansion in Beverly Hills. Next, Diamond Dave had a pinky nail 1 inch long that he used to apply nasal medications. I once said, in relation to David's Jewish heritage, David Lee Roth doesn't know the difference between Auschwitz and Disneyland. Next, Prince's art director asked if I could adapt my unused Hendrix poster from 1968 for a San Francisco show at the DNA Lounge. Prince is a big Hendrix fan and owns one of his guitars. Never leave a good image in storage. Reuse and recycle. Next, a simple solution for the legendary group's appearance at a Northern California winery in September of 2014. Next. Okay, theater posters. Next. I don't much like this poster, but it was my first Broadway theater poster. In fact, I was hired to make a grim interracial marital drama look like a happy rock musical. Also, it was Lanford Wilson's first Broadway show, and I would do posters for several Lanford Wilson plays after this. I was stuck in the rock poster business, but once I had created a theater poster, I was allowed to do more theater posters, which sounds strange, but it is one of the little-known facts of the graphics business. If they don't see it in your portfolio, they don't trust you can do it. Go figure. Next. A musical based on the dime novel hero of the same name. Suddenly I was doing all these theater posters that featured heads. While I was waiting for this comp to be returned so I could do the finished art, they had already printed the poster. That seemed to happen a lot to me. Next. Remember this Jimi Hendrix reject? It rose from the dead a year later with sunglasses and a reefer for this forgotten musical about the recording business that ran for only 2 nights and starred then unknown actors Richard Gere, Nell Carter, Barry Bostwick, and Peter Allen. The image would live again for 40 years later, thanks to Prince. Next. Good God, another head. Oy. This musical, based on a tale of Joan's survival, starred F. Murray Abraham and a college chum, Gretchen Corbett, who played Joan, with musical direction by another college mate, Stephen Schwartz. Next. Another comp that got printed in another Lanford Wilson play, a coming-of-age drama featuring the debut of the young actor Christopher Walken. Since it takes place in Southern California, I suggest the protagonist's profile as a desert landscape. Next. I created all the rosettes and interlocking Celtic borders with a drop bow compass and ink, then filled it all in with dyes. I had just bought an airbrush and I had no idea of how to use it. But I managed to fake my way through it, shaking all the time in complete terror. You are not supposed to admit these things, David. Next. In the fall of 1970, I heard through friend Roger Puckett of Trident Poster Galleries that producer Hal Prince, who had produced Cabaret and Company, was mounting a musical about the end of the Ziegfeld era, written by Stephen Sondheim. I called the agency and they said I could make a presentation, but it would have to be for free as they spent all their sketch budget already. So I did a sketch for free, based on this picture of Gloria Swanson in the ruins of New York's fabled Roxy Theater. Next. Luckily for me, the producers chose my sketch, which I couldn't believe. But the producer thought the woman was too dykey and should have big hair, big tits, and a red dress. Period. Think Dolly Parton. Oi! Next. I went home and I did the Dolly Parton revision, and it was horrible. It totally ruined the Deco period quality of the idea. So I knew I had to create an alternative that would make them forget about the Dolly update, as I called it. Next. I needed to turn my anger around, so in one of my books, I found the still of Marlene Dietrich in von Sternberg's film, Shanghai Express. Next. I immediately saw how this could become the alternative that would save me from the odious Dolly update. I literally whipped out a pencil, creating the title as a spangled headdress with a small crack traveling down the face to indicate the end of an era in the theater. Next. I delivered both the Dolly update along with a full color comp of the Dietrich concept shown here. I immediately got a phone call from producer Hal Prince telling me that the alternative version inspired by the Dietrich movie, still, though he never knew the source, was the greatest theatrical poster he had ever seen. A bit of hyperbole I was glad to accept. By turning my aesthetic anger and venom, anger into a creatively better artistic solution, rather than spewing verbal venom, which I really wanted to do, I was able to create a breakthrough piece of art that became the Mount Rushmore of my career as a theater poster artist. Next. Edgar Lansbury, Angela's younger brother, asked me to stick my head out of his office window and look left. There, right in my face, was a huge version of my Follies poster on the Winter Garden Theater marquee, where the show was soon to open. Edgar said, I'm doing a musical about Jesus. I need a poster. I've got $100 and I want that, referring to the Follies image. I thought, oh my God, he wants Son of Follies. So I said, Edgar, well, I'll do it for $100, but if this musical runs, can you give me $50 a week for the run of the show? Of course, he said. Well, I thought it would close in a week, but it ran for 8 years. Next. Next is a drink of water. Where are we? Back one. Edgar Lansbury, no. Originally called the Trocadero Gloxinia Ballet de Monte Carlo, we decided to shorten the name, and over time it has become known as the Trocs. These ballerinas are all men dancing en pointe in toe shoes. I featured the two prima ballerina, You Want to Get Some Booty and Ivana by Chicago. Next. Two lavish Royal Shakespeare Company productions. Romeo, set in the Regency period of George IV, with sets inspired by the Regent's nutty Royal Play Palace, the Brighton Pavilion. Midsummer Dream was set in the Art Nouveau period, with much inspiration from Maxfield Parrish in lighting and costumes. These two posters were printed as large silkscreens. Next. This was a big Lanford Wilson off-Broadway hit about the denizens of a seedy New York hotel that also became a short-lived television series. Next. Edgar Lansbury brought Canadian hippie magician and illusionist Doug Henning to Broadway with rock music, naked women, wild animals, a backup group, strobe lights, and fog. It ran for years, needless to say. Next. This melodrama about a theatrical love triangle was Janet Leigh's live theatrical debut, and it was, let us say, inauspicious. And it was the very gifted Jack Cassidy's last role before his tragic death by fire. Note, don't smoke in bed. Next. A Joel Grey musical. He was playing the Dauphin, Charles, opposite the St. Joan of Anne Reinke. The entire production was based on Maxfield Parrish, with exquisite sets by the great Reuben Tartunian and costumes by the legendary Willa Kim. I created an homage to Parrish, with all the furbelows and gewgaws unapologetically lifting from the master. And I drew the gestures oversized to make the adolescent Dauphin seem even smaller. Next. Alfred Urey's musical, based on the Eudora Welty short story. Star Barry Bostwick, Brad in the Rocky Horror Show movie, had broken his leg during a rehearsal and used his leg cast to great a comic effect at the opening performance. As they say, the show must go on. Next. A Joel Grey musical about Vichy France that tries to make escaping the Nazi occupation a tuneful romp. I drew their Citroën escape car in a cartoon manner so as to make it the co-star of the poster with the brilliant Broadway thespian Joel Grey. Next. A musical about the record biz in LA starring Alexis Smith. I am showing the original art next to the printed poster to show the effect of cheap printing and separations, which sometimes can be very depressing to the artist. Next. A two-person drama about Sarah Bernhardt's last year alone in the south of France with her valet. She is dreaming of her palmy days as an international stage sensation with glamorous posters of her created by Alphonse Mucha. And that's one that she's dreaming about. Next. 3 concepts, the icing, ballroom, and the cocktail hour. Next. Famous soprano Beverly Sills' farewell performance at the Metropolitan Opera in Don Pasquale, and her retirement from the stage. The poster is a 6-foot-high silkscreen. Next, a poster celebrating the reopening of Radio City Music Hall after its complete restoration, right down to the reweaving of the carpets and drapes, which took 2 years to complete. Next, a wonderful all-black off-Broadway production based on Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. Always jam tomorrow, but never jam today. It should have been a hit, but the theater can be a fickle mistress. Next, a drama about the sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce and his internal bout with his own psychic powers. Next, a poster announcing the first National Gay Choral Festival in New York City, Pierrot and Doves against a moonlit Manhattan skyline. Next, it's the pencil sketch and final art for A Little Shop of Horrors, which had a great script, terrific performers, an inspired puppet, wonderful lasting songs by Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, everything an off-Broadway musical show should be. For reasons I did not understand at the time, the producers had me remove the body and head of Seymour and just leave his hand, but I soon realized it made the image look more mysterious, which was great. Sometimes the client's right, guys. Next. A truly great one-man show starring Stan Freeman, who had been Marlene Dietrich's accompanist during her drunk and falling off the stage period. He brilliantly portrayed the famously neurotic pianist-composer Oscar Levant, who said, "There is a fine line between genius and insanity, and I have erased that line." During his 1950s talk show, referring to Marilyn Monroe's conversion to Judaism in order to marry Jewish playwright Arthur Miller, he quipped, "Now that Marilyn Monroe is kosher, Arthur Miller can eat her." His talk show was canceled immediately. Next. What a guy. Also, he is Oscar Levant is the one who debuted Rhapsody in Blue by Ira Gershwin after it was composed. So he was quite a brilliant pianist. This is a brilliant drama of great depth by British playwright Carol Churchill about British colonialism and all its weighty issues, done with great comic finesse. As I look back into this poster, it is an entirely successful visual graphic for a truly great play. Next. My West Coast Follies, the 20th anniversary production at the Long Beach Civic Opera, starred Juliette Prowse and Dorothy Lamour, among others. The woman's profile on this poster is based on Dolores, considered the most statuesque of all the Ziegfeld girls. All she had to do was stand there. She didn't have to do anything. She was the only Follies girl that actually just walked across the stage, and everybody fainted. Needless to say, after the Follies, she married well. Next. This show resembled Little Shop of Horrors in some ways, but it was the first teenage toxic zombie musical. The lead characters, Toffee and Johnny, meet and fall in love at Enrico Fermi High. He falls into the plutonium waste pond near school, but somehow still manages to go to the senior prom with Toffee, even though he is a toxic zombie. I'm not making this up. This was my first completely digital illustration created in Adobe Illustrator. Next. 2 comps for the Broadway musical version of the Baroness Orgy novel that takes place during the French Reign of Terror. The protagonist is a British aristocrat who is a spy for the British Crown. Next. 9 of the 19 posters I have donated for this yearly benefit for actors suffering from AIDS. Each year features Broadway and movie stars performing the work of famous composers such as Harold Arlen, Jerome Kern, the Gershwin brothers, Stephen Sondheim, Jerry Herman, and Johnny Mercer, amongst others. Next. In 2005, I began a relationship with City Center Encores in Manhattan to do their yearly revival of musicals from the past. The first was a revival of the musical version of the drama A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, which began its creative life as a popular novel. I created posters for them in from 2005 to 2009. Also shown here is Pearly of the I Sing, The Apple Tree, Kismet, Face the Music, Stairway to Paradise, and Applause. Next. 2 more, No No Nanette, 1925, and On the Town, 1944. Next. Finian's Rainbow, 1947, and Music in the Air, 1932. Next. This encore's revival during the 100th anniversary of the Ziegfeld Follies, which started in 1907, was the best production ever done of this difficult musical and had all the Sondheim fans battling for tickets. Next. I had done a poster for Durang's Sister Mary Ignatius Explains It All to You and Beyond Therapy, both wonderful satires. But this musical spoof on noir melodramas was sophomoric and silly without the necessary charm, but it was a fun poster. Next. For the Sierra Madre Playhouse here in Los Angeles. To Kill a Mockingbird, 2011, 20th Century, 2012. Next. Driving Miss Daisy, 2013, Lion in Winter, 2013. Next. More posters. I'm sorry. The Byrd Show. This poster was created over a weekend for my first art show at the Triton Poster Gallery in Manhattan in 1971, with a multimedia presentation by the infamous future pornographer Wakefield Poole. Roger Puckett, the gallery's owner, had gotten permission from Yuri Mucha, the son of Alphonse Mucha, to do a limited reprint of Mucha's La Dame aux Camellias by his father. On the paper we used, we could fit 2 Muchas, so I created my poster as an homage to that Mucha composition. As you can see here, I reversed the image and used an Art Deco motif rather than Mucha's trademark Nouveau design. I put myself in my handmade suit on a balcony in Miami Beach in place of Madame Bernhardt on her starlit balcony. I reference that starlight on the window shade behind me. My poster, along with Mucha's, is in the collection of the Louvre in Paris. Next. Obvious but successful solution to a graphic problem, and somewhat amusing to boot. Next. A Maxfield Parrish take on Corinthians 13, the faith, hope, and love Bible verse. She was originally nude, but a tasteful schmata and some flowers came to the public's rescue in the nick. What was I thinking after the Tommy Penis incident? I was just stunned that the art director for the Holy Bible had asked me to create a poster. That would never happen today, by the way. Next. John Schlesinger, the film director, called me on the phone and asked me, no, we missed. Oh, this is the New York Art Deco. Yeah, okay. This show contained the largest exhibition of Art Deco period artifacts since the famous Exposition des Arts Décoratifs held in 1925 Paris. This one was held in the upper and lower lobbies of that Deco Valhalla Radio City Music Hall. I bought the two bower doves in the foreground, and this is also in the collection of the Louvre. Next, John Schlesinger, as I said before, the film director, called me on the phone and asked, I picked up the phone and he said, "Hello, David Byrd?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "This is John Schlesinger." And I said, "Oh, Barry, you're doing that fake English accent again." He said, "No, it's really John Schlesinger. I'm real." Oh. So, at the time I first met him, he was testing Goldie Hawn for the lead. But Karen Black, with her mysterious, wandering eye, won out. As you can see, the crowd is, next, as you can see here, the crowd is lifting up Donald Sutherland before it stomps him to death at a 1930s film premiere. Donald Sutherland's character in Nathaniel West's savage, anti-Hollywood novel, ironically, was named Homer Simpson. And it is obvious that Matt Groening based his cartoon character on this schlubby character from Nathaniel West's novel. After I finished the poster, I was dreaming about hands and hats for weeks. Next. I love this first comp, which uses the famous Muybridge cat from his Animals in Motion, so essential to the concept of cinema, and also representing for me the magical number 13. The client thought it would put a curse on the festival. He told me he actually wanted a semi-nude male bodybuilder in mirrored sunglasses and a wet t-shirt as the image for the poster. Okay. Next. By 1980, by the time we had agreed on something, it was now the 16th Chicago Film Festival. By this time, I figured a Chicago skyline would be appropriate. Next. This poster, as well as the packaging for a fortune-telling dice game. If you have a copy, you are one of the 12 people that do. My clients were a very fat lady from Van Nuys and her equally portly son. For some reason, we always had our business meetings at the House of Pies. Next, digital paintings created from drawings I did for a book with Paul Goldberger, architectural critic for the New York Times, focusing on 30 New York landmark buildings. Next. In 2004, Disney Imagineering called to ask me to do an oversized poster for the entry to Main Street at the new theme park they were creating in Hong Kong. Being that the park is in Asia, most of the figures are Victorian period Asians. Every figure was a separate drawing in ink, done by my partner Jolino, filled and painted on the computer and layered accordingly. I think I had 110 layers in Photoshop. Next, the file was huge. Okay, this is this cemetery, begun in Glendale in 1906, was the first to eliminate huge headstones and mausoleums, which it replaced with bronze plaques. So the ground, in order to make bronze plaques on the ground in order to make it look more park-like. I based my concept on the arts and crafts movement, which was flowering in 1906 when the cemetery opened. In the foreground is the famous Ibis Fountain, the centerpiece of the entrance to Forest Lawn, Glendale. Next. To celebrate Lee Salter's 50th year as a public relations agent in Hollywood, his partner, Jerry Digney, asked me to create a poster. I decided we should do portraits of his 50 most famous clients. I only had 30 days to do 50 portraits, which just seemed impossible to achieve. So I had to figure out how to make that possible. So here, after a shot, is the solution. Next, I created 5 acrylic backgrounds in 5 different colors, which I then scanned in high res. Next, I scanned in grayscale the best photos of the celebrities I could find and did very, very heavy retouching, and then posterized them in Photoshop. Next. Then I carefully painted the posterizations in a glamorous fashion. Next. I added a feathered drop shadow. Next. I chose a suitable type, face for each name. Next. I lastly added a heavy outline in a snappy, contrasting color. Next, Ray Charles. Next, Liza Minnelli. Next, John Wayne. Next, 50 portraits in 30 days. Next, Ringling College of Art and Design. This was my first retrospective at Ringling Art and Design in Sarasota in 2007. Next, a little reminder that one often has to take cheesy jobs and pretend that one just loves them. Pit of Fear, and by the way, Pit of Fear was a movie about Nazis in Tijuana who kidnap blonde girls from Orange County, bring them to a baby farm in Tijuana where they turn out Nazi babies. Okay. Okay. See you at your next drive-in.
Is it on Netflix?
Probably. And then we have Beyond the Grave. You can guess about that. Next. 2010 retrospective title, Set the Walls on Fire, at Vashon Island Gallery in Seattle. And I like this poster, even though it's just all type, but I kind of make the type work as an illustration. Next. This was my a big show at Brand Art Library Galleries, but I think it's a little busy. Do you think? But oh well. It has a lot of, it has maybe too much information, but hey. Next, 2 recent posters for the Dead's final go around and my visit to PCC.
Oh, you did that one on the right there?
That's the one I just did for you.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Oh my goodness. They aren't in there.
Okay, now, have you had enough? I'm going to tell you about illustration if you want to. Next. Book covers were the bread and butter of illustration jobs, as were vinyl album jackets. Shown here, The Divine Sarah, The Wit and Wisdom of Hollywood, To Drop a Dime, Possessed by the Moon, Turandot, Westmore's of Hollywood, Clothes Magazine, and Classical George Gershwin. Next, soprano Frederica von Stade for New York Magazine, Paul McCartney for his bio, Billie Holiday, Songs and Conversations, The Big Fix for Rolling Stone Magazine, Coffee Mate, print ad, The Discovery of Spaghetti for PM Magazine, Be Mine, a GQ Magazine Valentine's Day spread, and Handmade Suits for GQ Magazine, one of 6 fashion drawings. Next, one of 3 classic car illustrations for GQ Magazine in 1979. And I was particularly interested in doing volumetric images in front of very flat backgrounds, almost like a set. Next. Okay, I love doing these cheesy paperback covers. Speaking of cheese, the memoirs are fromage deluxe. She went into hiding to tell a tawdry tale indeed, though I tried to glamorize what was obviously a trailer park tragedy. Sparkle is about a man whose wife has novatuplets, 9 identical baby boys. Our hero gets drunk and unwittingly unplugs the incubators and all 9 babies die. He is subsequently arrested and executed on a television show created just to satisfy a nation's hysterical need for revenge. Your Sparkle Cavalcade of Death, 8 p.m. Again, I'm not making this up. Next. A big TV hit at this time, created by Norman Lear. I portrayed her like the Virgin Mary in a Russian icon, surrounded by her acolytes, and with a halo of 100% waxy yellow buildup. Her smile is beaming as she has just returned from the House of Pancakes. Next. Okay, TV Guide. Cagney and Lacey, Battlestar Galactica, fall preview issue done with my partner Joe, Prince Charles and Princess Diana, and 2 interior spots for the fall preview issue. Next. Okay, Robert Conrad in Black Sheep Squadron in 1978. And Angela Lansbury in Murder, She Wrote in 1988. This is not my favorite kind of work to do, but I think these are 2 of my better covers. Next, 2 of 15 book covers in traditional watercolor for these paperback reissues of Lord Peter Wimsey, a series by Dorothy Sayers. And Hearst Publications was the publisher. Okay, next. Yes. A 1975 creation for the New York Times, created with Paul Goldberger, its architectural critic, at that time, featuring 30 New York City landmarks, drawn in a Beaux-Arts style, for you to color. Next. In the fall of 1990, I became senior illustrator for Warner Brothers Consumer Products. We began with a department of 6 people, and when I left, it had grown to about 50 artists. This was my true art education, where I got to work with extremely talented artists to create art and style guides for all the growing WB characters and acquisitions. Looney Tunes, Scooby-Doo, Studio Stores, The Wizard of Oz, Friends TV show, Tiny Toons, Pinky and the Brain, Batman, Superman, blah, blah, blah. Next. This cover features the Acme Vaudeville Company, Daffy Bugs Tweety, and Elmer, which were originally created by the nutty geniuses at Termite Terrace, the animators building on the WB lot in the 1940s and 1950s. Next. 6 Academy Award winning WB cartoons. Baseball Bugs, Speedy Gonzales, which was his intro to the public, Bedeviled Rabbit, which introduced Taz, Beep Beep, which introduced Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner, Hair Raising Hair, which introduced Gossamer, and Sandy Claus, which introduced Tweety, Sylvester, and Granny together. Next. 2 of 6 collector plates for the Franklin Mint of the basic Wizard of Oz characters. Next. I did a series of travel posters featuring the Looney Tunes characters. Next. Okay. Daffy and Bugs in Bali, Tweety in Bermuda, Peppy and Penelope in Paris, Bugs and Honey Bunny in Cannes. Next, Pinky and the Brain, one of my favorites. I love this cartoon. Style guide front and back covers for cartoon series about 2 lab rats that leave their cage at the Acme Labs each night in order to save the world. Next, promo poster for the 1995 feature film Batman Forever. Next, 2 additional promo posters for Batman Forever. Next, the Warner Brothers Studio Stores asked me to create a series of paintings of the Looney Tunes characters as the subject of great artists. So here I have Daffy, done by Lautrec. The original Lautrec poster is El Dorado, so I made it El Ducado. And then there's also Porky and Petunia as a Grant Wood, American Gothic. Next. 3 Looney Musicians by Picasso. And Bugs, Is This Not a Carrot? By Magritte. Next. Oh, Harry Potter. Yes, I worked on the first 3 films. Next. Here's a drawing of the Great Hall at Christmas. It's a pencil study for the interior, and characters were added, and it was eventually painted. Next, the Chamber of Secrets. This is a final pencil concept for the chamber in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, where Harry fights the basilisk, which is kind of a giant snake. Next, several studies of concepts for the Prisoner of Azkaban, and also for the first one, which was, it escapes my mind. The Sorcerer's Stone. Sorry. So you know, I did a lot of things like signage. That's for the pub. That's early sketch of Diagon Alley. That's the Whomping Willow, where Harry's car lands, and that's Dobie, the house elf, and that's Harry with the Stitch, is it? Yeah, the Stitch, right. Boy, it's been a while. Okay, next. And here's some more studies in concepts. That's the, up there is the hippogriff, as I recall, and that's Harry's animagus, That's his actual father as a silver stag. And then there's the night bus, which picks up the students. And there's Professor Lubin, is it? Lubin?
Lupin.
When he changes to a werewolf in the Shrieking Shack, as I recall. And there's Harry's owl. Can't remember the owl's name, but Hedwig, yay. See? I need, okay. And that's Scabbers, and that's Ron Weasley's pet mouse. Okay, next. Several more studies and concepts. Oh, that's the Chamber of Secrets. That's the painting that Harry and his roommates have to touch so they can get into where they live. And that's Harry running, and here's Harry's books. And there's Harry with his, the school had houses that people lived in, and they all had different names. I can't remember Harry's house, do you? Yes. What? Say it again?
Gryffindor?
Yes, right. Yeah, you can see the OR in there. Yeah. So, I also designed a lot of the signage for the houses. Next. This humble castle obviously could hold about 2,000 students and faculty. This drawing kind of got away from me, do you think? Okay, thank you. Next. Thank you very much. Okay. Any questions? And don't be shy. They can be rude.
Your paintings, especially some of your earlier works in comparison to your illustrative work, I noticed with the central figures, they seem, the drawings or subject matter aside, but the central figures seem to have more weight to them than say when you're doing your illustrations.
Yeah.
And to kind of bring some of it back with some of the figures, you'll add bold outlines to kind of separate them.
Yes.
And how intentional is it between the two?
Well, I've thought about this. That's a good question, because I have thought about it. And I sort of believe that the eyes are it. People are mesmerized by eyes, other people's eyes. We all look into my eyes. It's and people who won't look you in the eyes, well, that's weird. Because maybe they've got something to hide. Anyway, so somehow the eyes, that old saying, the eyes are the window of the soul, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's kind of it, I think it's, and I think as posters or paintings, it grabs your eye. Not to make a pun, but it does. So, yeah, I that's why I did heads a lot. And I did a whole, I think I showed a whole portfolio of posters that are just heads. And it's everything from Broadway to rock. So, from Jimi Hendrix to Follies, it's all eyes, really eyes. And so the portraits I did were mostly like, I'm here, that kind of thing.
So you're just trying to essentially grab
Yeah.
the attention and the focus. You're intentionally drawing the focus.
Yeah, the image should be pow, or close to it, or maybe pow. Yes. Yeah, you.
Oh, okay. In your rock posters, aside from talking to the clients, whether it was the rock stars themselves or the individuals, did you ever listen to the music for additional influence?
Oh,
or-
God, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Any particular one that you could speak of that heavily influenced a poster art for you?
Well, all of them, really. because, you know, the thing about rock posters, at that time you, and probably still now, you did not, there was no, you could just choose anything, any subject matter, you know, so, like Indians looking up at you. I mean, you know, what does that mean? Well, it's just cool, you know, whereas for theater, you had to read the play, and then you had to project a distillation of what the play is into one image, which is just an MFer, you know, as they say. It's hard, it's difficult, and a lot of times you just don't succeed. I mean, how many shows? There's a bar in New York where they hang only posters of shows that failed, you know, and there are a ton. And a ton of them are mine. But the posters sometimes were good. Sometimes they weren't. But, you know, that's the breaks. You just got to roll with it and keep going. And don't get all, you know, I mean, you do get, you go and get drunk and then you go boo-hoo-hoo and then you have to go back and do it again, you know. So that, and did I cover that?
Yeah, but any particular band that was like
Oh.
really impactful for you?
Well,
during that time?
Hendrix, the Jefferson Airplane, Crosby, Stills and Nash, of course, and Prince. I mean, that's fantastic music. And I even did, you know, I did posters for like Sweetwater and other bands like, oh, there's one band in the year 2525, who were they? Was it Frost? Or no, I can't remember. I mean, I did a lot of weird, unknown bands that didn't succeed. But the ones that did succeed, I usually didn't, if I didn't know the band, I didn't take time to really listen too much. Maybe a few songs. And they said, okay, I'll do this. And, you know, you didn't need really much of it. You didn't need to draw the band members. You know, it's better to make a précis of the band and their music in an image. So for Crosby, Stills and Nash, the guitar was an obvious thing, but that'd be an interesting guitar, you know, that kind of thing. And also, another thing about posters is type and image, type and image, type and image, type. I knew nothing about type when I started. Nothing. I was sincerely embarrassed. But I had to do a quick study. So I started with press type. My first poster had press type. I was flying by the seat of my pants. How am I going to do this? So you learn about type. And you, besides learning about how to draw and paint, you got to learn about type. Because word and image. Sometimes it's just an image because it's so powerful. But usually, sometimes it's just words, which are illustrative somehow. But it's mostly word and image. And you have to connect them and, you know, make them work. And it's, you know, it is hard, but you lose some and you win some, and you just have to keep going. Okay? Anybody? Yes. Yes, sir.
What were some of your
Francesco.
what were some of your influences as a child before the age of artistic influences when you were before the age of 12?
Or the age of 12.
Or like around that time?
Well, I think the major influence was the fact that I lived in a town that was completely Art Deco. And I just thought Art Deco is what everything looked like, everywhere. But it's not true. When I went to Pittsburgh, I found out, no, it's not. So that really, there was something kind of mysterious and magical about the period and the concepts and such. Did that?
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't looking at artists back then. You know, I didn't really become aware of artists. And I swear, as soon as I found out I wanted to be an artist, I immediately found out who all the artists in the world were. And I went like, oi, I'm going to compete with this? But you know, you're excited and you just say, oh, I can do it, God damn it. So you just go ahead and do it. Yes.
On the subject of just starting out and staying competitive, what if you were just starting out today with everything that's out there? What would be the first thing you do to stay a competitive working artist?
Wow, boy, it was really different then. It's very different now, and we have all this media, and we have the internet, which the internet's a great gift for doing research. Let me tell you about research. In the old days, I had to go to the New York Public Library picture collection, where they have these little women cutting out pictures from magazines, newspapers, everything, and putting them in folders, which they, you know, like ducks, and all the ducks are in there. So you go and you look up what you're looking for, Indians or ducks or whatever, and you would rent these pictures, which you could take home and use as reference. And you got to take them home for 2 weeks. This is like a book. And that was very difficult. And so I started collecting catalogs and crap, you know, up to the ceiling, in case I had to, you know, beekeeper's annual, in case I had to draw bees. You know, I mean, you had to be prepared. But nowadays you can just Google bees. I mean, Jesus. It's like a miracle already. But, you know, you did what you had to, and it was very competitive. Now today, it's extremely competitive, and I think you just somehow, you know, a lot of being an artist is luck, and being at the right place at the right time, and being good helps, you know, or being inspired, you know, basically, and being able to, also you have to be able to sell your idea, which is not easy, because someone often, a client will say, oh, that's great, but I hate orange. You know, you have to be able to talk around that. You have to be able to tell them about orange, and then you have to try to convince them in a nice way, instead of, you bitch. No, you have to go, how stupid. Orange, what? Orange is everywhere. Anyway, you have to be able to calm them down and then make them think that they wanted orange. You know, I mean, and if not, then you have to think, okay, how about red violet? And they go like, well, what is red violet? And you, I mean, so you have to, it's a lot of, you have to sell yourself. You know, it's kind of, you have to have your own little dog and pony show in a small way. You don't want to be obnoxious like Donald Trump. You want to just be kind of forceful, but I'm not going to punch you in the face if you don't like this, you know. So, yeah, it's hard, and I think the internet gives you a lot of places to put your art. You know, I mean, there's so many things, I can't keep up with them. Pin it, and God, all these places, Instagram and Twitter and all this, you know, and it's very good. I mean, you can be on all these sites, and somebody may eventually call you. You never know. In the old days, we spent a lot of money doing promo pages in what are called the artist's workbook. which I think they still have today. And they were expensive. You know, a page could be $5,000 and have several of your images on it. And $5,000 was really a lot in those days. In the 1970s, $5,000 was like $50,000 or something. I mean, it was very expensive. But it was the only place where you could get in contact with the people who would hire you. Whereas now, you can have a website and just give somebody your web address and they can look at all your stuff. And you don't have to get up, you can stay in your pajamas. And you can wait to see if they want to hire you or what they want or discuss price or whatever. So, it's often good to have an agent, but you don't have to have an agent in this day and age, I don't think. In those days, it really helped to have an agent.
They wouldn't look at you.
Yes,
Didn't have an agent.
if you didn't have an agent, they would say, "Who is this bum?" You know. So, I had an agent. He was a little too straight arrow for me, but he got me a lot of jobs I would never have gotten. So, that's good. You know.
Have you ever been approached to do political posters for candidates, or have you ever had the desire to do political posters?
No. No, I'm political, but I don't want to, I'm not interested in doing that. It's for somebody else. Take a photo and stick it on and put his name. And what's the, I mean, I think that Ferry, Shepard Ferry, did a great Obama poster. It's world famous. And it certainly made his career. So, I mean, that's an example where a political poster made a big splash. Now, I've done things for ecology, but not for political candidates.
Have they ever approached you to do posters?
No, they wouldn't be so imaginative to do that, really. That would be nice, wouldn't it? And somebody must have gotten in touch with Shepard Ferry. But in the old days, ooh, what? That's rough. What? Oh, never. It's kind of like that. Though there are some great political posters for candidates, but not a lot, I don't think.
I think the most recent one since Obama would be the new Bernie Sanders by Jermaine Rogers.
Yes, right.
So I think he's out of Texas.
Yeah, Texas is a lot of good people there. Take the state, but a lot of good people. Yeah. So it just was not something I wanted to do, and I'm sure it would have been nice. I did do a poster for, back in 68, for, God, I can't even remember his name, and he didn't win. So, it's hard to keep all these names in your head, but I did do one. It was in black and white, and I don't even have a copy of it. It was way too early. And sometimes they don't fly, so you just, you use the idea somewhere else. Steal from yourself. Never forget, steal from yourself. Don't be afraid. If you think you have a good idea, rework it. And, of course, steal from others. Picasso said, good artists borrow, great artists steal. So, keep that in mind. Of course, you have to make it your own, or it's going to be too obvious. I mean, everybody says, oh, he likes Mocha. Well, of course. That's a postmodern, I have a postmodern concept, which is everything that's come before me is part of me. All the artists, and the universe before me are in my DNA, aren't they? Yes. All those people. And you've got to keep looking at all those people, because you may find somebody that just inspires the hell out of you. And then you do something that, becomes known, say, in a way. Any more?
In regards to your influence by Mucha and Parrish, it seemed like that there was a trend going on around that time,
Yes, yes.
but it seemed like it seemed to stem from your usage a lot and your fondness. How did
Well,
you feel about that? I mean,
Actually, it's a big kind of mishigas, because the 60s was very much a period of Art Nouveau revival. The 60s, and that's what all the rock posters were emulating, were the sinuous curves of Nouveau, and a lot of the lettering, the Nouveau lettering, is very sinuous and blobby and curvy and whatever. So that was part of the aesthetic of the time. And, boy, it started me looking around, and, I always was, the 19th century was a big influence. And the history of the poster is really began in 1800. The first posters was 1860 was the first poster, by the way, 1860. So, and it had to do with Charest, the French poster artist. So, and it had to do with Alois Senefelder, who was the founder of lithography. Without lithography, none of us would be here today. And it's probably the most important invention of the last 300 years, lithography. It relates to silkscreen, everything. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with inks and experimentation with different kinds of inks and whatnot? Opacity and inks you like, inks you don't, things like that for screen printing.
Well, I being a lithographer, I mostly worked on stone. So when you work on the stone, it's very different than screen printing. So nowadays, I don't think they have stones anymore. Those stones were from Bavaria, where Alois Senefelder lived. And that's how he discovered lithography. These stones were in his mother's apartment's courtyard, or apartment building courtyard. Those were the original litho stones. I don't really know what the light bulb moment was of how he discovered that you could print from this thing, but he figured it out. And he was not an artist. He was a playwright. And he wanted to make copies of his plays. That was it. But it revolutionized everything, and it is probably the most important invention, as I said, of the last 300 years. I mean, we wouldn't be anywhere without it, actually, today. So.
Musical scores, I think, were part of that too.
Yes, musical scores as well. Yeah, because, up until then you had to get a scribe. Someone had to, you hired somebody to write your letters, to do a lot of things, to put your music into whatever those things are. Yeah.
Copying, probably, writing out in the courtyard.
Yeah.
Something spills, you don't want it to ruin what do you have available. You have the papers you're writing on, and probably you know, and you see
Yeah,
that
it's very complex because it involves acid and gum, and you have to treat the stone so that it becomes grease resistant in places and
most likely they would
grease
probably
friendly in
finish
other
the
places.
stones.
So I never really worked with inks because I wasn't involved in silk screening. But I love silk screen, and I would love to do it. I would definitely love to do it.
With that in mind, there's,
Oh yeah,
yours.
there.
So when we have each guest artist come in, we what's called co-publish a screen print, which means we make a limited edition and we split it with the artist. And so this is David's. And David is the first person of all these artists that we've ever invited here. He's a poster artist, so he did a poster for his visit. So each guest artist print that we do here tends to be a little different than the artist work that everybody's familiar with, because it's a little different of environment, and you're not in the art department here, that we're vocational education. So our artists that come in here tend to do quite different things, and David's came out very lovely, and it's commemorating his visit right here, right now, today. So
I used to have brown glasses, which I loved, but
yeah. So we did a 5-color screen print.
Yeah.
Each color was printed one color at a time, and it was a class project here. We recruited advanced students to mix colors and help with the screens and help with the print production. And David, being the artist, he just gave us a file, a high-res file, and we did all the technical stuff. So this is how our end result came, and I'm happy with it, and it was a good experience for us all.
And if you guys haven't seen how screen printing works, each color is a separate entity, and it goes on one of these screens. This green material is a photo emulsion that creates like a stencil. And so the lighter colored areas, the fabric on this screen is open, so the ink will pass through there. So this represents the red color, the dark red color. And this one represents the blue-green color. And then we had to kind of remake the screens each time for each new color. So these are all the different layers. And we can't teach you guys how to draw like David, or how to illustrate like that, but we can teach you how to do screen printing. And if you're interested in learning this process, we have classes in the summer. So we have flyers out on the table. You can grab one as you leave, starting around the middle of May and running through the end of June. We have a computer techniques class, so you can learn how to use Photoshop, Illustrator, all those programs. We have screen printing on hard surfaces, plastic, glass, metal, and we have a textile printing class, so you can learn how to print your own t-shirts. So 3 different classes. If you're interested, this would be a great time to try it out. And the classes meet just 3 days a week, so it's a kind of a limited time commitment, and just for 6 weeks. And you'll learn how to do all this stuff and how to put things like this together. You'll be amazed at how fast you learn and what fun it is. Okay, so we'd love to have you here if you're interested. Okay.
yeah, and you guys did a great job on the prints.
Thank you.
Really terrific. Really terrific.
It wasn't easy, David.
Well, bless you, bless you.